NFL Week 10, you've made it to the most in-depth analysis of survivor pools here on YouTube. This is Scratching and Surviving. We're taking you all the way to the finish line next. All right, guys, welcome back. For those of you who have been here before, for you newcomers, you are in for what I hope is some education on survivor pools and just thinking about how to look at these in maybe a different way than you have in the past. Now, there's obviously no correct, perfect way to play these, but there are some bad ways. So we're going to hopefully help you navigate the minefield that is survivor pools. So welcome again, guys. If you have been here before and you did not subscribe yet, do me a favor. You're back for a reason. Give us a subscribe and give us a like. It means a lot to the algorithm. If you are new, hold off on your subscription to this channel and don't like this video until the end. If you think you got something out of it, that's when I want you guys to subscribe and like it. So we'll jump in to what we're looking at this week. First, let's talk about last week for a second. In the video last week, we did a lot of talk about fading of Cleveland, fading of New Orleans, and things change, right? So I do these videos on Wednesday morning each week, and then things change. Now, Cleveland became a much bigger favorite than they were on Wednesday. They trade Dobbs. The line moves, Watson plays. That line moves all the way up to 13. So now Cleveland actually became a little bit better play than New Orleans. I was in my pool. I've only got 2 entries left in a very large pool. It's double picks. It was double picks last week. It's double picks again this week. With those 2 entries, I did want to fade. I still thought it was worthwhile to fade both Cleveland and New Orleans with the double picks, because if either one of them lost, we were going to knock out, I think we had 800 and change people left. We would have knocked out over 700 people in that pool if one of those teams would have lost. Even just a New Orleans loss, which it really looked like there was a good chance that may happen when you were watching that game. But if one of those teams would have lost, it would have put me in a really good position to win that pool, or at least get me closer to winning the pool. As it stands now, and even before last week, with 2 entries out of 800 and change entries left, I'm a huge underdog to win that pool. So you've got to take chances when you are behind. We talk about equity on this channel all the time. You calculate your equity just by taking the amount of entries that you have in the pool, and you can divide that by the amount of money, let's say, that you can win by scooping the whole thing. There's a couple of different ways you could do that, right? Or you can figure out, if you started a pool with 1,000 people and you were one of 1,000, right? You could figure out exactly how much your entry is worth. Let's say it was $10 to enter that pool. You have a 1 in 10,000. Your entry is obviously worth $10. If you now have 100 people left in that pool with 10,000 and your entry is now worth $100, you've 10x'd your money on that pool. That's going to help you when you start calculating maybe hedging and figuring out how much you have in that pool. Basically, it's another way of saying, if I were to buy your entry or you were to sell your entry to me, what would you sell it for? Well, equal, if all things being equal, you would sell it for exactly what it's worth. And in this hypothetical, it would be worth $100. Now, if I was able to pick some teams that others didn't take that really have no more future value, and I had teams available to me like the top teams in the league, then of course your equity is going to be greater. Now, the greater my equity over the pool, the more I may want to become a little bit more conservative. So if I've taken a lot of really long shot type of teams, weak teams leading up to this point, well, at some point you've got to start cashing in that equity. Now, this may be the week you're going to want to do that. We're going to dive into that in a second. First, though, guys, I just want to mention the Sharp app. As always, I've got right over here the QR code. If you download the Sharp app and you want to become a pro subscriber to the Sharp app, use code SURVIVOR. That's going to get you 20% off of the Sharp app. I'm heavily involved with the app, one of the founders, and a lot of the tools that you see in the Sharp app I have created, especially the prop tools. If you play props in any sport, you're going to want to get the Sharp app. We've got something called the Proptimizer. I use it every day. Now, if you just want to tail my picks, that's fine. I mean, the picks have been phenomenal as far as props go. Really, all the picks have been crushing it in the NFL. It's been a good season so far. But the props historically have been really, really good. And I use the Proptimizer to really filter through what I like as far as my props. And then I use the Proptimizer tool to filter out some of the props that it doesn't necessarily agree with, and then those are the ones that I go and make a bet on. So it's been highly profitable for not just myself, but the pro subscribers over in the Sharp app. So give that a check, and again, use code SURVIVOR. It's going to get you 20% off of the pro membership. Now back to what we've got going on this week. Let's jump into Survivor Grid, and you could see, listen, Dallas, 16.5 point favorites this week. On my spreadsheet, I've got them at like a 91% chance to win because, as you guys know, I use the Sharp app and I look for the midpoint of both of the money line, and that's going to give you a more accurate win percentage. But it's not going to be far off from what Survivor Grid has. And you can see there's EV here on the Cowboys, despite the fact that 42% of people are taking them. Why is that? Well, because they have such a high probability of winning. So Dallas really, if you've saved them to this point, and not many of you have, but as you can see, there's still 40 some odd percent of people who can take them across pools, across all pools that are out there. If you save Dallas, I don't know why you would wait any longer, unless perhaps you had Buffalo. But even in this case, I think it's just too big of an advantage to give up and pass on Dallas again this week. And what makes this an even better play is the fact that, look at Cincinnati at 33%. What we really want to have in these pools, like think about this. So if you're in a pool, I always like to look at the extreme examples because that helps me to mentally visualize exactly where we're at. Granted, 40 some odd percent, you're going to have 45% of your pool is going to have Dallas. Okay, fine. We're going to be on a team that a lot of other people have. But there's one other team that's going to be highly taken as well. It's a similar situation to what we had last week with New Orleans and Cleveland, where initially early in the week I did like New Orleans, but because that line moved all the way up to 13 on Cleveland, I was flipped, and then I actually took Cleveland with one of my double picks in that pool, and I was going to originally take New Orleans. I got off it and took Cleveland. Neither would have changed, but you have to be fluid here and look at where the lines are. But again, think of the logic. If you were the only person who could take Dallas in your pool, and there were 100 people left in your pool, you're still a big underdog to win that pool, 1 out of 100. But what if the other 99 people took Cincinnati? You opened it up, the game's lock, it's 1 o'clock on Sunday, you get to see what everyone's picks are, and you're the only one with Dallas. Like, you're gonna love that situation. Now, maybe that's not even the best way to look at it. We'll talk about it in a little bit better way because Dallas is such a huge favorite. Obviously, you're going to be excited for that. But even if you flipped it, if you were able to be the only one on Cincinnati and everyone took Dallas, I'd be excited about that as well. Not as excited because they don't have as large a chance of winning, but there's a 10% chance they lose that game. And if I can win my Cincinnati game, I take the pool down. So almost any situation where you're the sole person on a team and everyone else in the pool is on another team, that should make you super excited, right? Because I don't really care if everyone else wins or not. The fact that I have a chance for everyone else to lose and they're all focused on one team, that's the key. They're focused on one team. If I take a team that only 1% of the pool has, okay, that means 99% of the pool is on another team or other teams. If that 99% is spread out amongst 7 teams, well, that's less of an advantage that I have because obviously not all those 7 teams are going to lose. You may lose 1 or 2 of those teams, and maybe we only lose 10 to 20% of the pool if we're lucky, right? But if there's just one team, that gives me a much greater chance. You look at the math, the way to figure this out mathematically on the probability of, let's say, 2 outcomes happening. Let's go back to the Survivor Grid quick, and let's just use their numbers in this instance, right? So if you wanted to figure out the probability of you winning with Dallas and Cincinnati losing, you're just going to simply multiply the probability that Dallas wins. You want to just multiply the probabilities of what it is that you're measuring for. So we want to see a Dallas win, so we're going to take 90%, and then a Cincinnati loss. Let's just assume we're going to go with the 73% chance that they win. So we would multiply that by 27%. So what's that probability? So let's say we're just going to go with 90% and multiply it by 27%. I'll do this behind the scenes. There's a 24% chance that we're going to knock out all of the Cincinnatis. That's phenomenal, right? You're not going to get that probability all that often, which is why the 90% or 91% chance that I'm estimating it on my sheet is so relevant here. And even though there's 42% of the pool that are going to be on Dallas, the fact that there's 33% on Cincinnati makes this a much stronger play, right? So we've got a 24% chance to knock out, if you had 100 people in your pool, 33 people. So we really you don't want to risk the fact and take a chance on a team other than Dallas if you have Dallas available to you. Now, we're talking a lot about Dallas. A lot of you don't have Dallas available. If you happen to have Buffalo available, similar situation. Not as strong as Dallas, of course, but you're going to want to look to Buffalo as the next best option. And now you're fading both of these teams. So how would you do the math to figure out what's my chances that, let's say I'm the only one with Buffalo in my pool? What's the probability? Everyone else is on Dallas and Cincinnati. What's the probability Buffalo wins? All right, so you would take 76% of that, right? So you take 76%, you multiply it by the 10% chance that Dallas loses, and then multiply that by the 27% chance that Cincinnati loses. All right, and that would give you a 2% chance of scooping right there, right, or knocking people out. Now, it's unlikely that you're going to scoop in your pool if the numbers hold to what they are here. There's a 2% chance, though, that you're going to lose 75 people out of 100 in your pool. Not too bad. So that's why you see the EV here of over 1. EV of 1 is kind of flat on Survivor Grid. If it's an EV above 1, that means it's positive EV or expected value. So it winds up being a good play in theory, right? And this is why Cincinnati is not that great a play, because of their probability of winning and the amount of people on them. We don't really love them at a 0.88. So I'm hoping some of that makes sense. So I would really be looking this week to avoid Cincinnati in all formats. Let's look at my spreadsheet, and this is at the 100% future value. For those of you unfamiliar, just quickly, this is just a spreadsheet. I use it for guidance. I'm not going to, I don't necessarily play exactly to the spreadsheet, but it does open my eyes. It gives me a different view and a different look as to what's going on in the pool. As the season goes on, the spreadsheet becomes less and less valuable because future value becomes less valuable. We're in week 10. We're past the midway point of the season, and we're looking, especially in smaller pools, the future value really becomes non-existent, right? If you're still in a pool with thousands of people left, future value is important, and quite frankly, you're going to have to get all the way to the finish line in order to win the pool. Sure, you will take a chop with a lot of people. That's fine. But ultimately, you're trying to really take down a huge pot and payday, which is why we start to look at the game theory and why we start to get off of a team like Cincinnati being picked 33% of the time. But when we look at it at 0%, what you're seeing is the top two teams. Basically, this is always going to show the teams with the highest win probability. That's Dallas and Buffalo. When we jack this up to 50%, it's going to just change a little bit. Now, it brings Seattle into the equation here, and it gets you off of Cincinnati because Cincinnati still has future value. Cincinnati's got options here. When we look, let's put the Survivor Grid back on the board here. Cincinnati, you're going to have other options. So not only can you fade them and have a chance of really picking up quite a bit on the pool entirely, you've got in week 12 a chance to take Cincinnati against Pittsburgh. Like when we look at it, they're the second choice in that week as of right now. You've got Detroit you may have taken. Now Tennessee is going to be an option that a lot of people are going to be on, but this is going to be a chance for you to fade Cincinnati this week and then fade Tennessee, which a lot of people are going to take in week 12. And it gets you taking teams. You may have a larger favorite with Cincinnati or a team that's close to being the same favorite in Cincinnati, and you're not going to be taking a team. If you took a Seattle, you're basically taking, if you took a Buffalo or Seattle or Baltimore, you're taking a team with a very similar likelihood of winning in Cincinnati over Houston, but you're getting the advantage of the fact that so many people are on Cincinnati this week, and then they will not be on Cincinnati when you're going to take them in week 12. So it just makes total sense that Cincinnati is the team to fade. Dallas still being the most likely team or the most picked team this week, I don't want to fade that team because of the high likelihood that they win. If I don't have Dallas, I'm looking to Buffalo. If I don't have Buffalo, now I've got to make a choice between Seattle and Baltimore. Now, if I don't have those teams available to me, I've got to come down to Chicago and Pittsburgh as potential options. And then at that point, you have to weigh in, is it really worth it? Now, I think at that point, to me, I'd rather just take Cincinnati and stick with the crowd. When we look at the Survivor, the spreadsheet, when I get it to 100, it does pop for Chicago as being an option here. It becomes the second choice because such little future value. Now, if I was in a massive pool, I would consider this play. You see 3% of people are taking taking Chicago and Pittsburgh each, so you've got about 6% of pools on these teams. In smaller pools, not even a consideration. In mid-sized pools, I'm not thinking about it. Even in large pools, I'm going elsewhere. Maybe in just super large pools where I want to take a chance that both Cincinnati and Dallas lose and we can knock out a lot of people, and I don't have Seattle, Baltimore, or Buffalo available to me. Those are the only times I'm really considering Chicago and Pittsburgh. So I don't want to make that crazy pick here and take that high-risk pick in most formats. But again, it's going to depend on your pool. If you're in a double pick pool, which I am in, I'm going to have to take a serious consideration at some of these teams because I've made double picks in previous weeks. So I have a lot less. I don't have Dallas available to me. I've got a lot less of these good teams available. I'm going to have to look to teams like this, Chicago and Pittsburgh, in my pool. So your formats are all going to be dependent on where you go this week. But I think it's a pretty straightforward week. If you have Dallas, you're going to be on them. I think avoiding Cincinnati in all formats is going to be the plus EV play. If you just cannot avoid Cincinnati without getting down to Chicago or one of these weaker teams, and you're in a pool that is not just massively large, I would say anything over 500 picks at this point, 500 entries left in your pool at this point, even maybe more. Before I would start considering those teams. So if you've just exhausted all your other picks and you have to go there, then of course you're going to make that choice. But if I had other picks available to me, I think we can achieve what we're looking for in a game theory standpoint without having to go too far down. Some weeks we want to take that 3-point favorite because it fits. Last week was one of those weeks we were talking about doing it. I liked it, but then when the Cleveland popped up to 13, it skewed that a little bit. So some weeks it works really well, or at least in theory, we hope. But when I say works well, it works well in the sense that it makes sense from a game theory standpoint. It's unlikely to happen, right? We just talked about taking a team like Buffalo or Baltimore and having a team that has a fairly good chance of winning the game, like a Buffalo here or Seattle, but having it work out to where we lose Cincinnati or Dallas or both and really being able to advance ourselves far in the pool, of course, is still unlikely, but it's unlikely that you're going to win your pool also, especially if you're in a larger pool. If you're down to 10 people in your pool, even with 10 people, if I just put your name in a hat and picked one out, right, you still only have a 10% chance. But it's all relative because in your mind, you started out with 100 people, so you had a 1 in 100 chance. Now you're down to 1 in 10. What happens is now you start to feel it. You can taste it. You can taste that the fact that you can win, but you're still only a 10% chance of winning. Now, again, in those smaller formats, I don't want to take as much risk because I am a lot closer than being a 1 in 1,000, right? But you're still a dog here to win. So you've got to play properly. You've got to use a little game theory. And of course, depending on your pool, especially when you get down to very few people, you want to start looking at what other people can take, because the advice I give you here may be different because your pool is it's an anomaly, and maybe everyone in your pool has taken Cincinnati already for some crazy reason, right? Unlikely in this case, but you understand what I'm talking about. Your pool may differ from the massive pool, especially when you have a small one, because now we're down to a small sample size. If you're in one with 1,000, 2,000 people, that's been pretty much single picks every week, you're going to probably adhere very, very much closer to what the Survivor Grid's odds are saying. All right, I've gone longer than I usually like to do. Guys, if you did enjoy this video and you're new, please give me a subscribe, give us a like. We appreciate that. And then, as always, you guys crush it in the comments, leaving me questions about your pool. Always be specific and let me know exactly what the teams are you can take. If you're down to just a small amount of people, let me know kind of how many people can take each team that's left in your pool. As much information as you can put in your comment, it's going to help me give you the best advice I possibly can. So, guys, good luck. Let's hopefully all be back here together. You guys keep crushing it for me. We're adding subscribers, adding people watching these videos on a video that loses people in the type of pool that we're in here, Survivor pools that lose people each and every week. We are growing each and every week, and that's thanks to you guys, so I appreciate it. Good luck. We'll be back next week with more analysis on Scratching and Surviving.